comrades and young revolutionaries, delegates to this second National Council of the YCL. 2.5 years ago, we met in Mafikeng, Northwest, to constitute the third National Congress, and despite the chaos deliberately created to cause confusion at the Congress as we sought to determine the tasks in building a vibrant, radical, and militant YCL, we emerged successfully and more resolute and determined to advance the struggle for socialism in our lifetime. The period since Congress has allowed this National Committee to rebuild the YCL and inject new life into our structures, better able to steer the course in the struggle for socialism. These political reports, comrades, and the other reports that will be tabled in the National Council will be about how far we have come in building a distinct youth formation whose tasks are to educate, fight, agitate, organize, and mobilize for socialism. We're meeting under the theme Youth for Socialism, Work, Health, and Education. And these are the main struggles that young people face and are a reflection of the deepening crisis of inequality, of poverty, and of unemployment. This second National Council must emerge with tangible tasks, not just for us as young communists, but also for young people in general, so as to ensure that democracy works for the millions amongst them who are not at work, not receiving education or training, and not accessing quality health care, and whose only hope and future lies in socialism. As a generation, we find ourselves in the middle of a memory of struggle against apartheid on the one hand, and the hope and vision for a better future in society, nation and country on the other hand. In determining our mission as a generation, we must avoid, comrades, into falling into a trap of being unhistorical, as some insist. The connection between the struggle against apartheid and the task of building a national democratic and socialist future cannot be divorced from the organizations that brought about this freedom. Granted, there are and will always be challenges. There will always be differences on how to achieve our historical mandates, but these differences should never drive any of us, especially young communists, into abandoning that struggle for hegemony, power within the movement and in society at large. We are continuously courted as a generation to either abandon the organizational forms that brought apartheid to its knees and create new organizational forms in pursuance of the same struggles, or to forget the interconnection between the history of underdevelopment, poverty, and economic deprivation created by apartheid South Africa. This, we're always falsely told, can only happen if we start on a new slate, and thus the foundation of a project for building a better future will be created. Forget apartheid, we're always told. Forget about the ANC and the SACP alliance. Join or form new parties, and in that way you'll be able to freely build a better future. I want to state up front that there is no contradiction between those who say that the ANC is not the alpha and omega of the struggle and those who declare that they took no part in advancing the aims of the apartheid system. In fact, both tendencies demand of us to abandon the form in which apartheid was and the shape that apartheid gave to modern-day South Africa. The scars and wounds of apartheid inflicted on our parents remain visibly inscribed into our future. And only the ANC and the SACP can fully heal these scars by achieving the aims and objectives of the National Democratic Revolution. We who are converging here today represents the future of a socialist South Africa. A future rooted in the struggles for national democracy and economic emancipation as led by Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Raymond Mhlaba, Elias Motsoaledi, Dennis Goldberg, Ahmed Kathrada, Rusty Bernstein, Harold Wolper, Arthur Goldrich, and billionaires who were arrested in Rivonia 50 years ago. We shall not forget nor abandon the organizations they formed, which today we believe represent the only hope for workers, for students, for youth, for women who were the foremost victims of the apartheid system and who continue to be faced with the capitalist and imperialist exploitation. We who are converging here today, comrades, represent the future of a socialist South Africa that is rooted in the blood that was shed by the apartheid forces, the blood of Chris Hani, of Steve Biko, of Solomon Mahlangu, of Ruth First, of Bran Fisher, and many others whose sole crime was their dedication to the liberation and economic emancipation of our people. We shall never abandon their organizations, which today represents the deepening and advancement of the National Democratic Revolution. We who are converged here today proclaim that their society, a post-apartheid capitalist society, is not what we will settle for, and that we will not tire until we attain socialism. As we declared in the last Congress in Mafikeng, a socialist society is a society where, and I quote, the economy is socially owned by all, democratically controlled, utilized to meet the needs and interests of all our people, subject to democratic and humanistic planning based on the principle that the free development of each shall and will be the condition for the free development of all. This is the only society that will guarantee universal emancipation, encompassing genuine economic freedom and complete political, national, and gender liberation and emancipation. Socialism for us is not a fancy concept. It is about our lived reality. It is about clear running water, electricity, education, healthcare, economic and social justice, equality, housing, support for cooperatives and small enterprises, the participation of all people in the building of a better, humane, and peaceful world, and an end to socialism. Our role, comrades, is to root these values in every teenager and every young adult, every boy and girl, every young pioneer, for it is they who will represent and who will build and defend this socialist future. But why did we select this theme as the National Committee for discussion at this National Council? Over the last 19 years since the ANC-led democratic government has introduced significant changes from the apartheid education system with major achievement, which includes, in the first place, the creation of a single basic and single higher education system from more than 10 education systems, making basic education free and compulsory. Secondly, the introduction of outcome-based education, the building of new schools, crèches, and the improvement of colleges and university infrastructure, the creation of a non-racial, non-sexist education system, the empowerment of communities to participate in the education of our children, the basic nutrition and health support for school children, investment in financial and academic support for college and university education, and a significant decline in the number of out-of-school children over the last 19 years, and in fact, the highest in the African continent. And also the promotion of sports and recreational facilities within our education system. All of these, comrades, could not have been attained had it not been of the dedication of an ANC government to education, and more so, the prioritization of the ANC by the fourth ANC government and administration. Education, unlike in many other developing economies, is the highest government expenditure in percentage to the growth domestic production. It is also, however, worrying that the quality of education, despite the huge expenditure, has not drastically improved or increased. There are failures that we should not mask and weaknesses we should not feign, and therefore will not tell any lies to ourselves and to our people. This includes the crisis mainly due to corruption of the of the non-delivery of textbooks to schools on time, the training and retraining of teachers on new forms of and systems of education, the quality of, the wages of teachers and children being in class on time, learning and teaching for the education of for the duration of the schooling period, the general participation of parents in the education of their children through school governing bodies and all other structures, and the school infrastructure crisis, particularly in Limpopo and the Eastern Cape. The state of the schooling system in our country is reflected in the National Infrastructure Management System report, which the Department of Basic Education has released, and we reflect there what the specific problems with our education system is, where there are problems of electricity, problems of water supply, problem of the ablution facilities, problems in terms of stock libraries, laboratories, computer centers, and also the crisis of mud schools, which we believe our comrade and communist in the Eastern Cape, Comrade Makupula, is working hard to ensure that we deal with. This obviously can be contrasted with the state of these schools in 1994, where in the same schools were in the worst conditions compared to now. However, a lot more needs to be done. These realities, comrades, are also unfortunately a reflection of that reality. Mainly confronts the education of the black child in particular. It reflects the racialized pattern of our education system and the need for government to urgently deal with the issue of the norms and standards for education in schools once and for all, in order to ensure that we invest our resources to urgently alter this skewed education system. In many instances, development in education is destabilized by corruption. Senior state officials delay the delivery of education infrastructure in the name of getting their palms greased. We have, through our education summits, which we convene annually, called for the following changes, and in particular, ensuring that all schooling times, teachers and learners are at school, and that teachers are paid better, and that all schools have sufficient classrooms, and that all schools have stocked libraries and sporting and recreational facilities, and that schools have proper and decent sanitation, basic nutrition, and that all schools are within at least a 5-kilometer radius of every child who need to be in schools, and that all school children and their school facilities and school staff are safe and secure, and that all children and teachers have the requisite learners and teacher support services. We have consistently and are quite excited that the Department of Basic Education for the first time is beginning to engage and discuss the policy around not making public matric examinations results. And we believe that it's one of the major steps that we collectively as the Progressive Youth Alliance, but also in particular together with COSAS, that we need to be advancing and making sure that this demand is realized. But that these 10 demands that we should advance, working together with COSAS and the PYA, should help us realize our slogan of making education fashionable. We must place these demands at the center of the ANC election manifesto and also the discussions in the Alliance Education Summit. The real meaning of freedom and democracy lies in education, and the steps begins with making education compulsory, accessible, and of good quality. Through education, and if we actively make a meaningful contribution, we would have changed the lives of the sons and daughters of the soils for the better and for a long time to come, and therefore change the course of our country. Equally, with quality basic education, we will be building a foundation for economic ownership and control. We can never, comrades, speak of jobs. We can never speak of quality healthcare. We can never speak of land and land ownership and economic emancipation without education and without the requisite skills required to work the land, to own the economy, and to operate the healthcare system, but even worse or even better, to be able to have jobs. This is why, as the YCL and also as the Progressive Youth Alliance, we need to champion these key campaigns on education, on health, and also on work. The concept of work under capitalism assumes a different notion. Under capitalism, work is recognized only in as far as it involves the sale and purchase of labor power. That is, insofar as it is a job and therefore a commodity. This is so, even though when one does work for subsistence for so long as they do not directly exchange their labor power for wages, they are regarded essentially as unemployed. The value of work is only recognized when the workers' labor power is exploited or the commodities they produce are exchanged for other commodities or money in the capitalist production cycle. Therefore, struggle to deal with unemployment integrates a fight against economic exploitation and seeks to expand platforms for productive work that is not trapped in the exploitation regime. This should be one of the central focus of our discussion on youth unemployment. Briefly, this is the situation facing the South African youth in relation to unemployment, which, as Marx states in Capital Volume 1, is a condition, necessary product and lever for the accumulation of wealth of a capitalist private basis. The number of unemployed people, according to the Labor Force Survey in 2013, is 6.9 million. So there are 6.9 million people who are unemployed, which includes those who have given up from looking for a job. And according to the same statistics, there are 3.5 million of the 10.4 million people who are young people who are aged between the ages of 15 and 24. And that all of these people, not only are they not in jobs, and thanks to the work of the General Secretary of the Communist Party in his other responsibilities, now statistics SA also looks into the number of young people who are not at work, who are not in school, but who are also not in an education and training institution. And those are 3.5 million young people. And that most of these young people are in Northwest, in Mpumalanga, Gauteng, Eastern Cape, and the Western Cape. And that the crisis of youth unemployment has made young people more vulnerable to various sorts of socio-economic mobilization and exposes them to lumpen activities. Young people constitute the highest prison population, for instance. They are the highest proportion in terms of the consumption or abuse of alcohol and drugs, sex workers, and so forth. But also that young people are more vulnerable to what is being referred to as transactional sexual relationships, particularly students in universities, young women in universities. The National Committee has developed an extensive discussion document on youth unemployment, which encompasses proposals and which we believe that all the commissions at this National Council need to have a discussion on. We're asking comrades this pertinent question on why the YCL, not to answer the naysayers, but to remind ourselves why young people within the SACP 10 years ago resolved to establish the Young Communist League. We are the youth wing of the SACP. We are the political preparatory school of the SACP. We are the factory for future communists. And of course, all factories have got their factory faults. But we are also the custodians of the current and future struggles of socialism. We are the future of the party, comrades. And that beyond these natural reasons, there's also a duty of being young and also being communists. We owe our existence not merely to the constitution and resolutions of the SACP, but rather the two are a reflection of the need by the youth of the country to have a political home and hone their skills and introduce them to Marxist-Leninist political philosophy and organizational discipline. We also owe our existence, comrades, to the youth of this country, who, either by membership or support, have entrusted us to lead alongside them in the fight for their rights, agitate for their social and economic justice, mobilize them against inequality, poverty, and want. We will learn, comrades, from their experiences and struggles and educate one another. We will learn and organize. We will organize for a vibrant, active, principled, and mass-based youth formation that will take forward their needs, interests, and aspirations. If we do not speak for the teenager who is a victim of gang-related violence in the Cape Flats, then we are not worthy of our existence. If we do not speak for the adolescent boy or girl in Springbok, here in the Northern Cape, who got sucked into a life of drugs and alcohol abuse, then we should close shop. If we do not speak for the young woman in a university who prostitute themselves in order to pay for their tuition, residence, or taxi fares, then we deserve no mention by the history books. If we tire in our struggle for universal access for sanitary towels for young girls in rural Inguza Hill, I hope Comrade Stera have spelled Inguza Hill properly, not in the way that the townshippers in Maritzburg, in the township where the GS comes from, will spell it. I hope it's properly spelled there. Then we deserve, comrades, no mention, and we actually deserve scorn. It is these young people and their plight which we must keep in our minds as we discuss and plot our way forward in this National Council. There were, in the last few months, attempts to pit the leadership of the YCL and that of the party against each other. These attempts, intended to weaken both the party and the YCL, have failed dismally as we unmasked their divisive intentions. Some of the issues will obviously be reflected in the organizational report. But here, we must emphasize, comrades, that the role of the YCL is to build a strong SACP. And conversely, the role of the SACP in part is inherently to ensure that they build the Young Communist League. We must expose and deal decisively with those who want to drive a wedge between the SACP and the YCL. As we said at the SACP Congress, we feel no guilt if we're accused of being supportive of our leadership in the party. The YCL derives its existence and political program from the South African Communist Party, and we're not going to apologize for that. We take pride and support our Central Committee and Politburo as our mother body. And we know our mother body will for quite some time be looking for a father body. But in the meantime, we support and apart, it's a parent body, Comrade Joyce is saying. But back, comrades, to the key question why we have the Young Communist League. We are, and I want us to underline this, comrades, that we're an organization of young people whose main objective is to fight for socialism and advance the political and organizational program of the SACP, whilst in the immediate agitating for a society that meets the basic demands of education, health, work, land, and housing, and also protect the environment. So we're an organization of young people. I know there are some comrades who are still in the National Committee who don't look still young, you know. Yes, Mr. Malika, of course. But we're an organization of young people whose main objective is to fight for socialism and advance the political and organizational programs of the SACP, whilst in the immediate agitating for a society that meets the demands of education, of health, of work, of land and housing, and protects the environment. Those are the 6 major things which we think as the National Committee, this National Council needs to endorse moving forward. That those are the objectives within which the Young Communist League needs to advance. At the last Congress, we identified those 6 areas as the main areas of work. And we think that those are the areas which directly touches the lives of young people on a daily basis. And those are the things which we need to be advancing. But over and above these basic demands, comrades, the YCL fights for equal economic participation through ownership and control of all of our people. And that we must never waver on this. And that this fight underpins the leitmotif of our establishment as an organization of young communists. We fight and agitate for all of this, irrespective of who is in government, who is in parliament, or in any apparatus of the state. In fact, our view is that because it is an ANC-led alliance government, as the organizational leader of our national liberation movement and the alliance, means that we have a duty to ensure that it accelerates the mission of meeting the basic needs, demands, and interests of young people. The General Secretary always says to us that if we do not have what Sasko had yesterday as part of the PYA, of going to his office in the Department of Higher Education and reminding the whole country that free education is a priority, then he will not have the muscle and power to be able to push ahead with the demand for free higher education in this country. And of course, we have always, in fact, in the last discussions in the PYA, we have said to the comrades in SASCO that we need to take stock of the progress that has been made, so that we do not demand for free further education and training when free further education and training has been provided. So our demand must be equal to that which has been provided over the last 5 years. And that, in fact, whether the GS is here or not, that we think, all of us in the Progressive Youth Alliance, that there has been significant progress in the last 5 years, more than it has ever been done in the last 19 years. We claim, comrades, that we represent the youth, and that it is incumbent upon us to understand the general status of youth in our country. And that young people, that our country is a young country with the median age, median meaning that the central age, which is 25, that if you take the oldest person in South Africa and the youngest person in South Africa, they meet at the age of 25. So this is a significantly young country, and that we constitute more than 41, as young people, more than 41.2% of the total population of our country. And that Census 2011 found more than 77% of the population being between the ages of 0 and 34 years. And it suggests, comrades, that development of any sort initiated by the ANC-led alliance government must be oriented towards young people. More importantly, any youth development that happens without the active participation, engagement, and consent of young people will fail to instill the confidence amongst youngsters about the future of this country and in this movement. Hence, we must insist, comrades, that nothing about us without us as the youth. The appointment of the new NYDA board represents for us a golden opportunity to recalibrate the role and objectives of the agency. This signals a departure from an NYDA notorious for rampant corruption, rent-seeking, and tenderpreneurship. It signals an end to the NYDA that was used as a personal ATM for some people. And that the new board, comrades, must be transparent and accountable and should be responsive to and be accessed for genuine developmental and entrepreneurial endeavors of the millions of young women and men who seek opportunities to better their lives and their futures. And we must say, comrades, that we fully support the decision of the NYDA to suspend the CEO of the NYDA. We have for years called for a forensic audit into the finances of the NYDA. We have for years bemoaned the fact that NYDA has been used for everything else except for what the NYDA is supposed to be doing. We have been central in the fact that, yes, there must be more resources allocated to the NYDA for youth development, but those resources cannot go into the NYDA as it is now. And the fact that the NYDA board has acted on the CEO and many others who were in the administration, who were there not because they qualified to be working for young people, but because they were related to this or that politician. Some of them even related to people who are now wearing red beret all over the country, and not for the needs, interests, and aspirations of young people. That the fact that there is change shows that we are going somewhere, comrades. And we fully support the decision taken by the NYDA board. But what is more surprising is that the DA youth says that we need to explain, something to explain why a CEO of the NYDA has been suspended. But to demand an explanation as if you are coming to the defense of the CEO of the NYDA is something else, which is what shocks us from the DA youth, which purports to be fighting against corruption, which purports to be the champion of the struggle against corruption. When action is taken against people who are corrupt or who are alleged to be corrupt and who needs to be facing due processes, then the DA youth and many others alleges that the actions of the new NYDA is with doubt. And we must say, Comrade Pillay, the national chair of the YCL and that of the NYDA, that we applaud the decision of the president to have appointed you as the chair of the NYDA. And we believe that, of course, you are not a YCL representative in the NYDA, but you are the chair. Comrade Solima Paila calls you the president of youth in the country. But you are the champion of ensuring in government that the needs, interests, and aspirations of young people are represented. And that the action that has been taken over this week shows what needs to be done in the entirety of government in order to deal with corruption, in order to deal with tenderpreneurship, but in order to ensure that youth agencies and generally government agencies are used to deliver and advance the needs, interests, and aspirations of the constituencies that have been targeted, instead of being the personal fiefdoms and ATMs of individuals. And we will support you through and through in this decision that the board has taken of suspending the CEO and many others who may have taken a role and part in corruption at the NYDA. The NYDA is an institution of young people, and that's where it needs to be taken back to. If we fail in the next 3 years of making the NYDA an institution of these young people, then we would have completely failed. And as communists, particularly as young communists, we never fail. And the example will be shown with how best we will make the NYDA work under the circumstance. Part, comrades, of the discussion in this National Council should be to ensure that we emerged with a clear charter in our view for youth rights that will address the immediate needs, interests, and aspirations of young people, which should be encapsulated in the new strategy of the NYTA. We should engage the Progressive Youth Alliance in this regard. At the last Congress, we noted that we straddle, comrades, between two political fronts, that of being part of the alliance as the youth wing of the SACP on the one hand, but also on the other hand, that of being part of the broader mass democratic movement as part of the PYA that leads young people in our society. We play an important role in shaping and contributing towards policy, but also this comes with its own weaknesses, strengths, pros and cons. But more importantly, comrades, we also share the needs, interests, and aspirations of young people. We have an important duty to unite the Progressive Youth Alliance and a broader youth voice in our country. The state of youth politics in the country has been dominated by populism, dogmatism, and has reached to the lowest ebb of self-destruction, readily assisted by a large section of the privately owned media. The disbandment of the Youth League National Executive Committee and the appointment of task teams at national and provincial levels represent an opportunity of rebuilding youth politics in part. We must emphasize, comrades, as we will show later in the report, that the issues which we will raise collectively as the PYA were not the personal and intellectual preserve of certain individuals. The rebuilding of the Youth League does not mean the abandonment of youth energy, militancy, dynamism, and impatience with change. That we must still have that energy. Comrade Mawetu and Comrade Bram and Comrade Vuyo. That we must still have that energy, that militancy, that dynamism, and that impatience with change. But what is more important is that we need to locate these characteristics of a youth movement within a sober organizational platform. Because some of the people who were in the leadership of the Youth League, it was as if badula batsuba nyaope. So we need that sobriety to prevail. Hence, more so than before, our alliance with the ANC Youth League, with SASCO and COSAS must be strengthened. Youth leadership should never be about self-enrichment. It should never be about opulence. It should never be about consumerism. It should never be about hypocrisy, comrades, and the disrespect as has been the practice in the recent past. It should be about shaping and preparing a manifesto for a future South Africa. It should be. This means, comrades, that we must never confuse ill-discipline with militancy and disrespect with freedom of speech. The reality is that we are the future of this country. But leadership, like respect, is earned, and that it is not accorded. And that in truth, it is about what we say, and it is not only about what we say, but it is also about what we do. Although we are free to express our views and agitate and mobilize young people to militantly advocate for these views, we also have a duty and responsibility to intellectually defend our positions. That when we asked, nationalize what? Nationalize for what? You can't say, no, you are drunk, and then start insulting people without defending that which you stand for and represent, which is what youth politics had almost become, gutter politics, instead of defending the views that which we strongly held as youth formations and youth leaders. But also, comrades, that we must take young people everywhere, in churches, in social clubs, in schools, in universities, in workplaces, within the fold of the Progressive Youth Alliance. That's our responsibility. We must not shy away from persuading and winning back youngsters who are in COPE, youngsters who are in the DA, or any of them, of the other Africanist chapters. if we are confident about the soundness of our ideas and the inherent progressiveness of our views, we should also be able to win over every young person behind our banner. For so long as there are 3.5 million young people not in jobs, not in education or training, and for so long as there are young people who are dying from TB, pneumonia, HIV, AIDS, diabetes, yes, diabetes, comrades, young people are dying from diabetes, or other preventable diseases. For as long as there are young people who constitute the highest number of inmates in our prison populations, for so long as there are young women who are victims of sexual abuse and violence due to their sexual orientation, for so long as there are young people still in poverty wages and not unionized, for so long as young Africans are subjected to xenophobic attacks induced by collective capitalist exploitation, for so long as there are young people who are denied access to land, and for so long as capitalist exploitation exists, the case for our existence and the attendant struggles for a socialist society still exist. A better South Africa is indeed possible. Ours is not a struggle of creating heroes or martyrs. Ours is to give young people agency by making them realize that they are their own liberators. We are masters, comrades of our own faith, or of our own fate. Ours is not a utopian struggle for the pursuance of power and office, but a struggle based on a concrete analysis of the material conditions that young people are facing with. You know, there are people, comrades, who think that they are born in office, they are born in positions. So that even when organizations that they belong to say, we don't think you belong here, they go there and form their own burial societies, stokvels, and all of that, and then design some nice hats, so that they must be in positions. That's not what we are. That's not who we are. We are not in organizations because of the positions which we occupy. Because with or without positions, as young communists, as young revolutionaries, we believe that we can effect the change in society. It is not, comrades, our way to follow personalities and to erect their monuments whilst they are still alive. That's not our responsibility. That's not our way. We know our history. We know we stand on the shoulders of giants that came before us. We know our leaders and our people and our movement, and more importantly, our party. Our struggle is not based on academic concepts. We're struggling to address real problems of real people. We're about mobilization of young people to come up with practical solutions. We are not a sideshow spectacle. We are the main actors in the history of our own lives, and that we are actually the makers of our own history. The YCL, together with the PYA, should and must mobilize students in universities and colleges who face financial and academic exclusions, young workers in the factories who are still paid a pittance, young people who work the land and do not own it, young graduates who are looking for and who do not have hope of getting work, the young entrepreneur whose hopes and efforts are shattered because of corruption in the private and public sector, the youth cooperatives whose energies are suffocated by monopoly capitalism. These are the young people that the PYA should represent, and it is their future and our South Africa that South Africa should be built upon. If they are not free, then the struggles of Rivonia, of Sharpeville, of Sophiatown, of June 16 and of Bipatong, of Bisho will have no significance in their life. This is why, comrades, we have the Young Communist League. This is why we need to defend it. We need to build it. We need to harness it. And we need to ensure that the energies of youth is concentrated into these organizations of the PYA that are geared towards the total liberation of our people. As we walk towards the 20 years since the democratic breakthrough